Monday morning. This is the third out of 4 presentations by my friend Rob Ekern of C.R. Ekern Company, and you probably know him by now. Let me suggest to you that you start thinking in terms of getting all 3 of these, or all 4 of these. There'll be another one later this year. All 4 of these, and this will be the guide to you for dealing with big customers, big clients. It is just exactly what has been needed. I have been disturbed over the fact that I couldn't find very much on stewardship. Stewardship makes such great sense, and yet so few agencies are using it. And when Rob came up and said, hey, and I realized that Rob's the guy who really kind of started the stewardship program, which we'll get into right now. Let's see who Rob is. You've seen him before here. Let's go to his picture and his little biography here, like heck. But he's been in the business for 40 years. He was with Willis, of course, you know, the big group. And, the main thing to know that he is the consultant in the country to big agencies and big customers and so forth. He's the one. He's the one that established all this. And he and I have been working together for I don't know how many years. But boy, oh boy, I think this one I really understand. I learned T-Corp from you last week, Rob. I didn't really understand T-Corp a couple of weeks ago, but now I do, and now I'm going to know stewardship. So it's your nickel. Let's go.
Well, thanks a lot, George, and as always, it's a pleasure to work with you. You know, you and I go back many years. In fact, I remember, George, this is, oh gosh, I just had left Willis and had started my consulting practice, and I flew over to your office at the time in California, and we talked then about stewardship reports, and that was kind of the beginning of bringing that whole discussion into the agency system. And you know, since that time, there's been a lot of conversation around stewardship reports, and you know, I hope today that we'll be talking and help your clients go a little deeper.
You bet they will, and I'm going to be pushing it like crazy. Go ahead.
Well, that's good. You know, stewardship reports are something that originally kind of came out of the mega broker world. You know, going back 20 or 25 years, you know, the concept of stewardship reports was really something for the very, very, very large accounts. We now, though, in the middle market, agencies and regional brokers are working with them, and that's really for a couple of reasons. First of all, you know, they're used as a way to differentiate. You know, everybody talks about it. Everybody says, well, we want to differentiate. And then we ask them to do something that may be a little different. And they say, no, that's different. Well, you know, differentiation is differentiation. And, you know, you can do these on an oral basis, meaning, you know, visit with your client about it, or you can provide them in a written version. You know, they can be, and truthfully, I believe they should be somewhat of a more formal presentation, because that may be the only time that an agent or broker actually gets in front of the owner of a business, especially if they're dealing with the CFO. But they're always based upon joint issues that particular client has, and normally it involves both sides. And when I say both sides of teams, what I'm really saying is, you know, agents sometimes will tend to go out and throw something on a guy's desk and say, well, you know, take a look at this, and then we'll talk about it in a week or two. You know, if that's the way you're going to do it, it's better to just kind of stay home. But this is a chance for you to walk into your buyer's office with perhaps, you know, 1 or 2 of your employees and talk to that buyer and show them what you've done for their organization. You know, stewardship reports are really a misunderstood vehicle by many agents and brokers. Many of them think, and of course this was because of word processing, and George, you know, you were at the forefront, and I was involved also when, gosh, I remember one time many years ago buying a typewriter called an IBM Selectric. And this particular typewriter could actually type the same letter 50 times. Wow, you know. But since that time, people have kind of confused stewardship reports with something that you give a buyer by the pound. You know, buyers don't want to read and look at 45 pages of fluff. So, we're going to talk about that in a minute. But first, let's talk about when these should be done. First of all, we believe, and I firmly believe, that these should be done 6 months in advance of the renewal date. Now, George, why would you think maybe that you might want to do this 6 months in advance of the renewal date?
Well, that's scary. That's a long way away.
Well, that is, but the nice thing about it is the reason it's done in 6 months is because there's no pressure around the renewal. It's a business meeting where you're not, as yet, in a potential adversarial situation with your own client, as we know some renewals can become.
Beautiful.
There's no competition. So this is your chance to tell the story before competition even begins. And we've had many clients, of our clients, that have done these, and in many cases, the owner sat in the room and has said, I was planning on bringing in another broker next year who's been wanting to work on our insurance, but, based on what you've showed us, we don't have there's no purpose in it. And the truth of it is, most buyers don't like the process. They'd rather not go out into the marketplace and get bids from other brokers. They just don't have any other way to judge whether an agent or a broker's been effective for them. So it's 6 months in advance of renewal because you're outside of the stress of the actual renewal. And if you wait until 3 months, chances are, in some cases, the buyer's going to say something to you like, why didn't you tell me this before? I've already agreed to let these other 2 insurance brokers come and work on our insurance this year. So that's the purpose.
Good.
Other things are, any time that there's any kind of a major upheaval, and the major upheaval can be things like a big loss or insurance carriers having problems. Anytime that there's a disruptive occurrence that's happening inside that account, it's better off talking about it. If you've hired a new resource, and some of you are some of the listeners are starting to bring in outside resource capabilities. But I'll tell you, this last one, George, is the critical deal. When the new CFO is hired, and of course, as you know, I call them Beelzebub, and everybody knows what that looks like when you've had an account for 10 years, and the person you've dealt with for 10 years says, oh, by the way, we've got this new person as the new CFO. You're going to love them. Well, of course, you go in and you realize you're talking to somebody whose eyes aren't even blinking. I mean, you're staring at the eyes of the devil sometimes. What the Stewardship Report does is it shows that new CFO what you've done for that firm and what you're going to continue to do for that firm, so that when they go through their process of analyzing, and I hate to use this word, vendors, they'll go on to the telephone supplier or the copy supplier or whatever, but they know that you, and George, I would venture to guess that everybody listening to this has had a situation where the new CFO got hired, and
I'm sure
the only way, and I can tell you as a working broker, that can become your worst nightmare when it's on your largest account.
Good point.
So here's really what it's all about. At the end of the day, here's what it's all about. It's about solidifying your value. It's really about having a discussion of the buyer around their expectations at a time when you don't have the pressure of the renewal on top of you. It's about building relationships. I can't tell you how many times. And when I would do this as a working broker, I would bring in people that were part of my team, and some of them built relationships with the buyer's team. So I made certain that they were involved in this process because it was about the relationships on a business basis. It's about identifying future issues because we can talk about that now. If we're waiting until the renewal to talk to the buyer about the future issues. And these are things like, you know, is the buyer looking to expand? Is the buyer looking to hire? Are there any new products that the buyer is going into? Are there any things that we believe we should be helping them address going forward? Because what it does is it sets up the renewal. And let me kind of share with you, this is really an important part of stewardship for the brokers and the agents. As we're doing these, and we get to the point to where we've demonstrated to the buyer all the things that we've done for them over the course of the recent past. And I mean, we're not going back a decade because that's ancient history. We're talking about the last 24 to 36 months. There's a point to where we begin to say to the buyer, now, we've achieved these things for you over the course of the last, you know, period of time. Here's what we're going to do for you over the course of the next 18 months. Now, what did I just do there? I walked them past.
He's thinking in terms of the long term rather than the short term.
Exactly. I walked them past the renewal date. And if we're then having a consensus of what the projects that we're going to achieve together over the course of the next 18 months, what I have just done is we've done, you know, the assumptive close, where if that buyer was planning on putting me to the sword, they're going to stop me. And if they're not in agreement, as we're talking about the 18 months, if they're not nodding, if they're not saying, yeah, let's do that, what I know as a working broker is that there's something else that may happen here, and I better find that out now rather than waiting in 3 to 4 months and finding my Christmas being ruined. So what I'm going to say to them is, my sense is, as we're sitting here, that you may have some concern over some of the things we're planning for the next 18 months. I wonder if you might share that with me. Now it's going to come out. Now, some of it we can fix. If it's the client is unhappy because I didn't return his phone calls on time or there was a problem, we can work through all that stuff. But I need to know, coming up on the renewal, if we intend to maintain broker control, what the intent of this particular buyer is, and that's the best way to do it, because now it allows me to set up the right role. That's really why stewardship reports are so critical to the revenue stream of agents and brokers. And by the way, George, there's about a 3% what I'll call controllable revenue leakage that goes out of every agency and brokerage on large accounts because they don't do these. Because the buyer then maybe brings in another broker or agent, and they may even keep the insurance, but they keep the insurance or the fee at a reduced cost because the competition beat them up. An account that they lose, you know, so it's not just accounts that you lose. It's accounts that because competition came in and you found yourself having to cut your income below your ability to make money. So, you know, that's what stewardship reports are all about. So why do successful brokers use them? It's because it forces them to test the relationship. I mean, or at least it allows them to test the relationship in a business setting. It forces them as agents and brokers to look inwardly at what they've done for this client. And, you know, I'll tell you, George, you want to get guys that get them real nervous is when I'll ask them the question, tell me 3 things you've done for this client over the course, what 3 projects have you been involved in with this client over the course of the last year? And only one of them can be about insurance, because you watch their eyes glaze over at that point, because they'll tell you, well, we got the right market, we got the right rates, we changed the wording of the insurance policies, we got the right correct rating for the long-haul trucks or whatever it was. Okay, that's 1 out of 3. 1 says we were good stewards of your insurance program. What else have you done for the buyer to help them improve their business cost? A broker who doesn't have projects going in an account is going to get fired sooner or later. Now, many agents and brokers abdicate that to the insurance carriers, which is fine. And then they wash their hands of it. And then they come back and they want to talk about the renewal of the insurance. And they've lost their visibility with that client. So it forces them to go inward. It establishes their identity. It gives that partnership. It does gauge what I call broker control. And broker control is this client working with us, or do they see us as a vendor and they're going to put us to the sword come renewal date? It tells us all that. Plus, it really gives revenue. So, you know, it blows my mind, George, when I talk this. You know, I'll get calls from time to time from agents and brokers, and they'll tell me, you know, so-and-so has just come in here, and they're calling on our largest account, and what should I do? And I'll ask the question, well, you know, did you do a stewardship report? And the answer is no. And, you know, I can't help you. You left the back door open. Somebody else has now walked in on your single largest revenue account. And we can't, you know, once the barn doors open and the process starts of competing for your own accounts, that's a bad day. So that's the purpose of this. So if you're going to do stewardship reports, what do you really need? And by the way, some of the ones I've seen out there are nothing more than you know, 32 pages of fluff. And you know, buyers don't read that. They're not going to read it, and you're not either, by the way. So we got to get right to the point. And here's what we need: we got to have, over the last 4 years or so, what their historical losses have been and what their premiums have been, and that's obvious. Now, the reason we're doing that is because we need to tie some of the projects that we've done to outcomes. If we show a buyer that, you know, we help them put in a risk control program of some type, now this is even if an insurance carrier did it for you. You know, your job as agents, and I'm saying this to the group, your job of agents and brokers is not just to sell the insurance policies, but to also be perceived as the gatekeeper of the resources which the insurance carriers are going to provide you. So you've got to have that, so you can basically say to the buyer, because these projects took place, here's what happened. Now we want their financial information because, you remember our conversation on TCOR, George, what we're looking to do is we're looking to show the buyer how we've been a business partner to them on their numbers. You know, we need to understand their strategic plan going forward, or at least, you know, not just because the insurance is what we've done in the past. We've got to be able to talk to them about, and we understand you're planning on doing this, you're going to acquire that, you're going to move into this particular marketplace. This is how we're going to assist you. Then we have to have a pretty clear understanding of what the client expectations are. And, you know, if we haven't met the basic client expectations, and we're doing this for a client that we haven't done anything for, chances are we're just kind of putting ourselves in a position to where, you know, it's going to have a bad ending. Brokers and agents always ask me, well, so where do we get information that we can provide our clients? Now look, you know, I'm giving you some websites here, and you can see that they're, you know, the major websites. By the way, III.org is probably one of the best ones, because III.org actually has PowerPoint presentations. It's the Insurance Information Institute that you can go through, and you can put a few in your own presentations. The reason I'm showing you the others is because the mega brokers have spent millions of dollars doing marketplace research and industry research about, you know, where's the insurance marketplace going, what are the issues for specific types of industries, and they put it on their websites, and they put it there for free. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that you take this information and you just photocopy it and you say, here's what Marsh, Willis, or Aon said, but it gives you a perspective that you can at least begin to, to translate into the words that would be effective for your own clients. So, that's where some of this stuff resides. And, in today's world, George, you said you found very little out there on stewardship reports. I mean, what kind of stuff did you see when you were out there? Was there much at all?
Well, I Googled and all that sort of thing on stewardship reports, because we're going to be adding stewardship system to a new program we have coming on called INA, Insurance Needs Analysis Connect. And you'll hear more about it later on, so I don't want to bore everybody with it now, but it'll be out in November. But anyhow, one of the things is stewardship, and so I looked at, and what I found, first of all, the great deal of the stuff on Google was about church. The church is sponsoring the stewardship.
Right.
Right. So it's right. The word there that it's very churchy, and I could.
Having been a stewardship chairman of one of my former churches, I can tell you that's a harder job than being an insurance broker. But that's another story.
Okay, that's what I found at any rate. So this is. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, there isn't very much stuff out there that's any good. So here I want to give your group kind of an outline that they should follow.
Okay.
And again, how you do this, you can do it verbally, you can do it written. Do not make it 37 pages. Make it 5 or less. But here's the first thing: a brief introduction to your firm. I see these things and people don't know what else to write or what else to pull together, so they pull together the first 10 pages about them. Look, the buyer already knows you. You don't need to go in and give them the whole, all the reams and reams and reams of paper, all the organizational charts and all the other stuff. They know who you are. So you make it brief. Make it 2 paragraphs. Then the next is the completed projects that you've done for this buyer, and you want to make this for like the past 24 or 36 months. It's got to be a short enough period of time that it's meaningful. I mean, if you go back 10 years, that's ancient history. So it's got to be just in the last 24 to 36 months. And then what we want to do is we want to demonstrate what the value was to them. And, when I say demonstrate, that I talk to you about 3 ways that you've created value, only one of which can be the insurance. What are the other 2? What are the other projects that you've done? How did it bring the client value? And put it in the perspective of total cost of risk. If we brought a client a project, and that particular project reduced their claims, we can then say, because we brought you this project, your claims reduced. And because your claims reduced, your total cost of risk reduced. That's how it all ties in together on a quantifiable manner. That's a business discussion. Then we want to talk about our anticipated value. And again, there's the part about what are we going to do for you going forward. If we have the right story that we've told the buyer going backwards, we want to be able to then say, but we're not done. Here's what we're going to do for you over the course of the next 18 months. These are the projects that we're going to work on your behalf, and this is what we expect to accomplish, and these are the resources that it's going to take to do it. Now, again, if you're with an insurance carrier and you don't have your own internal resources, and you're going to look to renew something with that carrier, then go to the carrier and say, what is it? Go to the risk control people. Don't go to the underwriter. Go to the risk control people and say, what is it that you think we ought to be doing on this account going forward? Oh, one other thing I need to say. When you do these stewardship reports, do not bring in the insurance carrier. If you do, the entire conversation will become about the carrier. It won't be about you as the agent and the broker. So again, I'm not denigrating the insurance carriers. But what this is about, it's about building your brand so that the buyer sees you as an important part of this process, not simply the spear carrier that goes to the certain insurance company and gets their terms and conditions. So that's an important piece. Then we give them the marketplace review, and we've talked here about where to get that information. If you're dealing with an account that's in any type of an industry, anything from aviation to not-for-profits and all points in between, there's data on what the marketplace is planning on doing, the insurance marketplace, on those types of accounts, and it's available at those locations that we've already talked about. Now, here's the close. You finish this by making a commitment about what our firm is planning on doing for you and how we're working with you going forward, and you obtain the validation. So it sounds like this. So based upon everything we've talked about, we're really pleased that we're working with you. We intend to achieve these. We've achieved these for you. We intend to achieve the following things going forward, and that's really, what we're planning on doing. How does that sound to you? And now you gotta just shut up and listen. And brokers aren't very good at that. But this is one of the basic selling techniques that many of us were taught. I was taught this. Gosh, I was taught this when I was 22 years old. Surprised I can remember that far back. But it was they would teach us, shut up. First one who talks loses. So when you've done all this, what you've got to accomplish is, what's the validation that the buyer's going to give us? And so when we walk out of there, we have to feel as though we've at least have a good grasp of where we stand.
Let me ask a question.
So George, those are the
Rob,
7
minutes.
Yes,
do you get that? Do you sign when you make the commitments? Do you sign Rob Ekern? I mean, if you're the broker, do you actually sign the pages? And if they validate, do they actually say, "I agree, that's what we want," and sign it, or is that necessary?
Well, that's a good idea. What we have, our stewardship reports are signed at the last page, where it talks about these are the commitments that we're making to you, and they're signed not only by the broker, but in many cases the president of the firm, and right down to the account administrators and all the other people, so that the buyer understands there's a lot more here than just me as an insurance agent. But I can't honestly say as there is that, but it's a good idea. I mean, that's a darn good idea.
Thank you.
No, and that's a darn good idea. I mean, so those are kind of the 7 sections, and here's the result. If you've done this the right way, the value of your firm has already been confirmed and acknowledged by the client. Any negative issues have been discussed, and they're out of the way. There's nothing hidden that's going to come back and jump out and bite you 90 days from now because you didn't, do so much as even apologize at the time you forgot to return the client's call. Their decision makers, the client decision makers, have already kind of, been informed because they're sitting there, and you've begun the renewal project. Now, I use that word specifically, renewal project. Successful brokers don't see the renewals as anything other than a project that they're working with the buyer. Some agents who don't work this way live in fear on every large renewal. But successful brokers see this as a project of simply working the renewal in tandem with the client. And but if you don't do the stewardship report, you're kind of going to guess about whether or not you'll accept that, whether that'll happen or not. So, those are the keys, George, on stewardship reports. And, there are some things out there. You can learn a little more about this at any one of these stops. And I think, George, it's very smart that you're looking to really help your group of folks understand and get better at stewardship.
Well, it's past time. It just makes such good common sense, and I knew you were the guy who came up with it to begin with, and have pushed it on through, and I knew that I could get a good understanding. So we're going to have another one of these presentations. It'll be the fourth one of what's the subject on the last one we'll be doing about.
Well, George, you know, we've done a lot of talking up to this point about how to have a business conversation with the client. And, you know, what you and I will talk about is some of the things that are now starting. And while they are early on with some areas, they're coming quickly so fast, and that is in the area of impacting a client's business analytics. And I don't want to give people a headache with that term, but you're hearing the term big data, you're hearing analytics, and we as agents and brokers have to kind of know where is it that we stand in this so that we don't get left behind by all the other industries that are, and agents and brokers that are really understanding how to do this. So we're going to talk about that in a selling sense, and we'll do that a little bit later.
I love it, and I'm appreciative of you to take the time to come down to us lower-level people.
Oh, come on now, George. You taught me this business. Going back to when I was an insurance agent in North Dakota 40 years ago. Did you hear the North Dakota? But that was a long time ago, and there's been a lot of miles since.
I know it. All right, well, folks, go to back to your email, and you can always get the quiz flash of the day, and also the E&O tip of the week, and then you can go in there to Rough Notes or Agencies Online. You have the archive. You can find his other ones back. Just go to the archive and go on down, and you'll find the first two. So try to take all these together and get them in front of your people. In the meantime, I will see you next Monday morning.